Let's look at a foreshortened figure and some helpful things to keep in mind when drawing a foreshortened figure. I've broken them down into about 4 different things that you can keep track of and keep an eye on while you're drawing that can help you when drawing a model that seems to be coming out towards us like this image we have here. The first thing to think about is vertical distances. So now that we can measure things in a drawing, we can check these vertical distances. So something I might ask myself in this figure is, if I were to take that whole head, hair and all, and put it into the rest of the body, how many times could I do that? How many heads would fit? And I might say something like 3. Maybe if I took that head, it would go once, twice, 3 times into the rest of the body, something like that. That's a common answer I get when I ask this. The issue with that is if I take this head and move it up, line up the bottom of the hair with the chin, you can see it's not even 1 time. It's 1 3/4 heads fit into the entire figure. So what that tells me is the whole rest of the body here is less height than this head. I would not expect that, but there it is. So keeping track of those vertical distances can save you from stretching the figure out and making it look like it's floating on the page instead of coming out at us. You need to watch horizontal distances also, but I find that vertical distances are the more common mistake, making those vertical distances too tall. The second thing to think about is overlapping. Remember that overlapping is what tells our eye and our brain what is in front of what. And in a foreshortened figure, you have a lot of stuff in front of a lot of other stuff. And so the overlaps are really going to be what help you communicate that to us as the viewer. Let's look at some of those. Here's an overlap. There's an overlap. And the hip coming out from behind it. There's an arm overlapping this and that. There's an overlap. There's an overlap. And so on down the figure. Those overlaps are going to be very, very important in communicating what is in front of what. Getting them right is crucial for the foreshortening to make sense. The next thing to think about is going to be horizontal alignments. And I'm going to ask myself the same question I ask myself about all horizontal alignments, which is what lines up with what along this horizontal line. And there's something interesting right about here. There's a group of things that all line up or close to it that I would not expect in a regular figure. And it's the knee, the pubis, the wrist, the other wrist, and the heel, and the hip as well. So that's 5 or 6 things that all line up on a horizontal that I wouldn't normally expect. And yet there they all are lining up on that horizontal line. So that's really powerful, really helpful way to keep yourself in check. Asking yourself what lines up across a horizontal. If I go through this elbow, for instance, here, it lines up right about with the shoulder, maybe through the center of the shoulder there, and through the tip of the nose and the lips. Look at the ear. This ear passes through the tip of the forehead. All right, and the other thing, this is kind of the last thing to think about, but it may be one of the more crucial things to think about, and I call it my rule of thumb. And it follows the basic rule of perspective, which is that close things appear bigger and far things appear smaller. So if you're standing next to your friend, they look like a full-size human. If they walk 100 feet away, they get really tiny. We all know that. We have experience with that. The figure's no different when it's foreshortened, and this is something that you can capitalize on, you can exaggerate in your drawing to really good effect, is to make the far stuff smaller than you think it should be, and make the close stuff bigger than you think it should be. So in this case, we have the foot here and the head here. If I look at this foot, in context, it just looks like the regular sized foot. But if I grab it and move it around, that foot is about the same size as the figure's nose. That's strange. Maybe the same size as their ear, top to bottom. So you can get away with that exaggeration all day long. You can make far stuff really small and close stuff really big, and you'll just heighten the sense of foreshortening. Maybe I'll throw a few images up that do that. But if you go the other direction at all, if you make the far stuff too big and the close stuff too small, you'll destroy your foreshortening. Here's another image with foreshortening. This one has exaggerated foreshortening. It's our comic book drawing of the Incredible Hulk. And this highlights what I was talking about with close stuff being bigger than you think it should be and far stuff being smaller than you think it should be. Look at this hand of the Hulk coming towards us. That hand is absolutely enormous. Let's take a look at the size of this hand. If I grab it and compare it to something else, it's the size from hip to toe. It's the size of the whole leg right there. One hand as big as an entire leg. Compare it to that other hand. It's monstrous compared to that other hand. Look at the size here. And it's important that it's that way because if this drawing was not done like that, if that back fist, for instance, was drawn at the same size as this front fist, things would get really strange really quickly. Now the fists are the same size, but it looks comical and it looks ridiculous. Why? Because the foreshortening doesn't work. That fist is way too big to make sense with the foreshortening. So remember, make sure the stuff that's close to us is bigger than you think it should be. Make sure the stuff that's farther away from us is smaller than you think it should be. If you're on the border, you can't tell, oh, I don't know if I have it the right size or not. Push towards it being too small if it's far away or too big if it's close up. That will just feed the foreshortening and it's fine. If you do the opposite, then we're in trouble. Okay, to recap the things to watch out for in foreshortening. You want to watch out for vertical distances. Don't let them be too tall. You want to watch out for overlapping. Make sure you're telling us what is in front of what. Make sure you're checking your horizontal alignments. What lines up with what across a horizontal line? And then remember that rule of thumb. Make the closer stuff bigger than you think it should be. Make the further stuff smaller than you think it should be. If you can keep track of all of those things in your foreshortened drawings, your chances of pulling off a convincing foreshortened figure are much greater.